July 2nd, 2012, Monday. Jen Noguchi walked home from an exclusive private school with her friends. They made their way down the busy streets of Tokyo wearing their school uniforms. Jet is the nickname her friends gave her, a name she earned from her speed in sports. Some of Jet's friends suspected she might be a near miss. None of them could have guessed the real truth. Window shopping always added a half hour to the walk home. Jet and her friends stopped at almost every window to look at the new fashions displayed. Fashions and window dressings changed fast in Tokyo, and there was something new to look at every day. At 13 years old, Jet was the prettiest and smartest of her friends, and somehow that made her the leader. Jet suggested they stop for a soda, and the other girls quickly agreed. The group of young Japanese girls, pigtails bouncing, then continued down the street talking about the school day that they had just shared while sipping on their drinks. Jet waved goodbye to her friends as she entered the gated area of her apartment complex. Once her friends were out of sight, she moved quickly to the ground-level apartment that her parents had. Inside, she noticed how dusty it was getting, something she would bring up with her mother once she got to her real home. In the back of the apartment, she stood in front of a plain white wall. "Voice ID, Jen Noguchi. Activate lift," she said. Her enhanced hearing picked up the hum of scanners hidden in the room. The illusion of the white wall disappeared and two stainless steel doors appeared. As the doors opened to a hidden elevator, Jet entered the elevator and said, "Base level 1, fastest speed." The doors closed and the elevator dropped at almost a free fall. Jet stood in the middle of the elevator and looked forward, not at all distressed by the drop. After the elevator dropped a few seconds, it rapidly changed directions and started to accelerate. Jet's hair was bouncing up and down and then was pulled to one side by the force of the acceleration. Still, she stood perfectly still inside the elevator and never reached for the handles on the wall. After a few minutes, at more than bullet train speeds, the elevator quickly slowed to a halt some 50 miles west of where it started and the doors opened up. Jet stepped out of the elevator into her real home. From the elevator and into the main hall, the space of the underground complex was impressive. "Activate intercom." "Mom? Dad? Where are you?" Jet said aloud in the hallway. "In engineering, honey," a female voice replied over the intercom. Jet took 3 super-fast steps forward and then used her powers to push softly down on the complex floor underneath her. The result of using her powers like this was like 2 magnets that repelled each other. To someone watching, it seemed as if she were standing a few inches above the ground and still maintaining the speed she had from her fast step. Jet quickly glided on the air past the unoccupied parts of the underground complex. The hallway was quickly coming to an end. Jet pointed the toes on one of her feet toward the floor, about a foot behind her. Reversing her power, she started to pull on the floor to stop her. Jet never looked down or even seemed to concentrate on this maneuver. Her control was outstanding. Once Jet had slowed herself to walking speed, she quietly and effortlessly lowered herself a few inches to the ground and started walking. The engineering room was large and impressive with its open space. It measured 300 feet by 200 feet, with a ceiling of over 100 feet. As remarkable as this was, the hangar for the giant sentinels was much bigger. The 6 sentinels stood 250 feet tall in the main hangar, and there was room for many more. Through the windows of the engineering room, the legs of the sentinels could be seen. Jet's mother was working on a hand and forearm unit which measured over 50 feet in length. Jet looked up at the monitors on the wall and saw that all the sentinels were in a state of readiness. Jet knew this hand and forearm must be extra parts. "What are you working on?" Jet asked her mother. During the battle with the giant rock lizard, the blue sentinel had its forearm damaged by a bite. The bite itself was not enough to hamper the servos or articulation of the arm, but it was enough to throw off the calibration of the weapon system. "I'm trying to find a way to make the calibration adaptive to damage or retrofit a stronger alloy around the sensors," her mother said. After some staring and thinking, her mother turned and smiled at Jet. "How was your day at school, dear?" "It was dull and unchallenging," Jet said plainly. "You're challenged in here. You need to learn to fit in out there," her mother said. "Dinner is served in conference room C," she heard her father's voice over the intercom. "Dinner is a little early, isn't it?" Jet asked. "You know your father's schedule. Any time he has available can become dinner time. Walk with me." They left the engineering room. Indeed, she was right. Her Her father was Japan's greatest hero, as were her grandfather and great-grandfather. Her father, Shogun was a superhero handle, had been everything a hero was meant to be. He had inspired people to be better, saved lives, and led the team that guarded Tokyo. Shogun's father and grandfather were also known by the same name. It had been handed down from father to son. Jet knew the name Shogun was more than just a cool-sounding name. Her family could be traced back to when the samurai first began. Tell me about these classmates of yours that you spend all your time with after school. Jet and her mother were still talking when they came up on conference room C. Jet stopped. She could sense other people in the room with her dad. Jet looked at her mother, who smiled. "It's a happy occasion," her mother said. Inside the conference room, Jet saw the 6 lead Sentinel pilots, 9 techs who worked for her mother, the 7 Heroes Union representatives who worked at her father's hall in Tokyo, both sets of grandparents, her father, and the other 5 members of the Tokyo team. They all stood behind her father, who had a proud smile on his face. He handed her an open envelope. "Read what it says," Shogun said. Jet opened the letter and read quickly. Jet then looked around at everyone and read only a small part of the letter. "Pleased to inform you that a place has been reserved for you at Alpha Academy," Jet said. Everyone started clapping and cheering so much that she only heard pieces of what everyone was saying around her. Shogun looked like he was going to explode with pride. He stepped forward and put his hands on her shoulders. Everyone else became quiet. 27 years ago, I was part of the first class that attended Alpha. It changed me from a boy into a superhero. It is my greatest wish in life that my only child will follow in my footsteps." He knelt down on one knee to place his eyes on a lower level and continued. "At Alpha, my old coach, Coach Connors, once told me to recognize history when it happens. For you, Jet, this is when your history begins." Shogun hugged his daughter, and everyone came forward to congratulate Jet on her invitation. She suspected she would get into Alpha since she had been born into this family. Even as a 4th-generation super, she heard stories of how demanding Alpha could be. Jet put all her hurried thoughts out of her mind and enjoyed the party. After only an hour and a half, her father's team was called away on an emergency. The Heroes Union reps quickly followed. The techs shuttled her grandparents to their homes. Only Jet, her mother, and the Sentinel pilots remained. After they left, it was just Jet and her mother, like most nights. As Jet was finishing up some cake left on a plate, she said, "So, what type of alloy were you thinking of using to reinforce the sensor housing?" Her mother smiled and said, "I don't know." Jet's mother rose and motioned for her daughter to do the same. She took her daughter's hand in hers and they started walking. "Maybe if we put our heads together, we can come up with a better solution than just stronger alloy." "Mom, do you think Dad wanted me to be a boy?" Jet's mother stopped and addressed her daughter. "Your dad couldn't be more proud of you, just the way you are." They started walking again when her mother said, "Besides, if you were a boy, your father would cry himself to sleep every night, because he would have a son who wears a dress." Jet found it in herself to laugh at her mother's joke. It made her feel better just knowing her mother wanted her to feel better. They started talking about the work ahead for the night as they started walking down the long hall.